Good evening and welcome to Short Ghost Stories Long After Midnight, a place where midnight chills come to life. Expect spine-tingling tales of ghosts and spirits, graveyards, haunted houses, and other creatures of the night. Turn off the lights and listen if you dare. The Churchyard Bell. At the far edge of the old English town of Grimshaw, where the last crooked street fades into fields and mist, stands the ancient church of St. Bartholomew's. Its stone tower rises above the rooftops like a silent sentinel, and beside it lies a churchyard so old that no one in Grimshaw remembers when the first grave was dug there. The gravestones lean at odd angles. Many of the names carved into them have long since faded, but the people of Grimshaw still remember one thing: the bell. It is said that the bell of St. Bartholomew's must never ring at midnight under a full moon, because when it does, the dead rise from their graves, and before the night is over, one living soul will be taken back beneath the earth. On the night Daniel O'Brien returned to Grimshaw, the moon hung full and pale above the town. He had been gone many years, long enough that the narrow streets felt unfamiliar and the houses smaller than he remembered. But one place had not changed. The Black Lantern Tavern still stood near the market square, its warm light spilling out onto the cobblestones. Inside, the tavern was crowded with locals gathered around the fireplace. The air smelled of smoke and ale, and quiet conversation filled the room. Daniel ordered a drink and listened. It did not take long for someone to notice the moon outside. One of the men by the fire leaned toward the window and frowned. "Full moon tonight," he muttered. The words seemed to quiet the room. An elderly man sitting nearby turned slowly toward Daniel. "You're not from around here anymore, are you?" Daniel smiled politely. "I grew up here." The old man studied him for a moment. "Then you must remember the churchyard bell." Daniel chuckled softly. "I remember the stories." Several people in the tavern exchanged uneasy glances. The old man's expression did not change. "Stories," he repeated. Daniel lifted his glass. "Ghost tales to frighten children." The old man leaned closer, lowering his voice. "They're not tales." Daniel raised an eyebrow. The man continued quietly. "When the bell of St. Bartholomew rings at midnight under a full moon, the dead rise from their graves. They walk the churchyard until they find what they're looking for." Daniel took another drink. "And what's that?" The old man's eyes were dark and serious. "One living soul." The fire crackled softly in the silence that followed. Daniel laughed. "You expect me to believe that?" The old man did not smile. "Believe what you like," he said. Then he leaned closer still and added softly, "But pray it doesn't learn your name." Later that night, Daniel stepped outside the tavern. The streets of Grimshaw were strangely quiet. Most of the windows were dark, doors were locked, curtains drawn. It was as though the entire town had gone to sleep earlier than usual. Above the rooftops, the tower of St. Bartholomew's Church rose against the moonlit sky. Daniel looked at it for a long moment. The old man's words echoed faintly in his mind. Then he shook his head and smiled. Superstitious nonsense. Still, curiosity has a way of growing stronger in the silence of the night. Before long, Daniel found himself walking toward the edge of town. The streets grew narrower, the houses fewer, until finally the road opened onto the small hill where the church stood. The churchyard gate waited there, black and crooked against the pale moonlight. Daniel pushed it open. The iron hinges groaned softly. Inside the churchyard, a thin mist drifted slowly between the gravestones. The ground was uneven with age. Old stones leaned sideways like tired sentinels watching the passing centuries. The church tower loomed overhead. Daniel walked among the graves, reading the names and dates. Some stones were so worn that only faint traces of letters remained. Others were newer. One grave near the center of the yard caught his attention. The stone looked strangely fresh compared to the others. Curious, Daniel brushed away the thin layer of moss that covered its surface. The moment he read the name, his smile vanished. Carved into the stone were the words, Daniel O'Brien. Daniel stared at it. Below the name there was space for a date, but no date had been carved, just a blank line beneath his name. For a moment Daniel said nothing. Then he laughed quietly. Very funny. Someone must have carved it as a joke. Still, the sound of his laughter seemed strangely small in the empty churchyard. Daniel glanced up toward the tower. Through the broken window near the top, he could see the bell rope hanging down into the darkness. It swayed slowly, back and forth. Daniel frowned. There was no wind. The rope twisted gently as if touched by an unseen hand. Then it stopped. The graveyard fell completely silent. A moment later, the church clock began to strike midnight. 1, 2, 3. Daniel watched the bell rope. It hung perfectly still. Then the first deep toll of the bell rolled out across the churchyard. Daniel's eyes widened. The rope had not moved, yet the bell continued to ring. 4, 5, 6. Each toll echoed across the silent graves. By the time the 12th bell sounded, Daniel felt the air around him grow colder. Then the ground began to move. At first it was only a faint sound, the shifting of loose soil, the scraping of stone. Daniel looked down. The earth beside one of the graves was trembling. The cracked stone lid slowly tilted aside. A pale hand pushed its way through the soil. Daniel stumbled backward. More graves began to move. The ground opened in dozens of places. From the earth rose figures grey with decay and dust. They were not skeletons, not quite corpses, something between the two. The dead. They climbed slowly from their graves, standing motionless among the crooked stones. Then one by one their hollow eyes turned toward Daniel. He began backing toward the gate. The figures started walking, slowly, silently. Mist curled around their feet as they moved. Daniel turned and ran. He reached the iron gate and pulled. It would not open. He pulled harder. The metal bars felt frozen in place. Behind him, the footsteps of the dead scraped softly along the gravel paths. A whisper drifted through the mist. Daniel. He froze. Another voice followed. Daniel, O'Brien. More voices joined the first. Low, hollow, repeating his name. The dead were calling to him. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. They knew who he was. They had known all along. Daniel tried climbing the gate. His hands barely reached the top when cold fingers seized his ankle. He kicked wildly. More hands reached out from the mist. Grey faces stared up at him with empty eyes. The ground beneath the graves began to open again. Daniel screamed as the dead dragged him down. Their hands pulled him into the cold soil. The earth closed above him. High above the churchyard the bell rang once more. A single hollow toll. Then silence returned to Grimshaw. At dawn the townspeople approached the churchyard. They did not speak. They simply walked among the graves until they reached the fresh mound of earth near the centre. A wooden marker had already been placed there. Carved into the wood were the words, Daniel O'Brien. Beneath the name was the date of his death, and high in the tower of St. Bartholomew's. The bell rope swayed gently in the morning breeze, as though someone unseen had just let go. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed tonight's short ghost story, consider leaving a comment. Feel free to like and share, and subscribe for more short ghost stories long after midnight.